Hi there, and welcome to the second part in our mini-series regarding G-Cloud procurement and how to run simple and efficient procurement. My name is Gary Seymour, and we're going to, over the course of the next 25 minutes or so, take you probably through the next stage of this little series around how to improve the quality of that procurement to ensure a better outcome and a greater understanding of the costs and the obligations that are around. So we're going to take you through it. I'm not going to reread all the slides again. So if you covered the first part, you would have seen some of these before, and hopefully some of it will be familiar. So as I say, in the first of the two, we covered a simple streamlined process and how we use that to gather and get to a better outcome and do the down select. In the second set, we're going to look a bit more at how we get to those key criteria, how we identify those, use those as part of the process, break them down from non-functional point of view to get the clarification and hopefully the decision. And introduce a bit more into the templated process that we've come up with, which again simplifies, gives confidence, and hopefully improves the quality in that audit trail. So from G-Cloud point of view, from the digital marketplace, the key is to try and identify a clear set of key criteria. The reasoning behind this is that it enables us to focus a lot more on what's important. So in requirements terms, this might be the business needs. We will look to often identify those key criteria both in functional and non-functional terms, maybe 50-50, depends on the service, but they enable us to focus and drive the selection process from the catalogue, from the 7,000 items that exist, all the way down to a set of services that are absolutely, that possibly will meet the requirements. And then we can go into further evaluation to get down to a smaller set. So from um, the route that we've identified for key criteria, and it all starts, dare I say it, with the functional non-functional requirements. Now, we in the previous webinar we did go through some of the key parts of those non-functional requirements. Typically, those break into both service lines and security, cloud security requirements, but also the functionals obviously are also part of that requirement set along with your existing service design principles and your service assurance process. We can take those and use those to identify the gaps and the quality issues that may exist. And we, as I say, we use the ITIL framework and the cloud security principles provided by National Cybersecurity Centre to actually help confirm that we've got a good coverage and a good understanding between the different elements of your service organization, the components that will deliver an end-to-end service. So obviously your service provider, your software as a service provider, let's say, is going to be considering just the parts that he's interested in, which is service delivery. However, for you as a business owner, you're more interested in the end-to-end service outcomes, and that may go beyond just the cloud provider. It may involve a number of other third parties. It may require them to interface to your service management processes to ensure that the business gets the outcomes that it's looking for. With that, we can map those requirements to our key criteria and to get the confidence that we've got a good coverage of those key service processes, those key security principles, and the obligations, therefore, are aligned, that are needed by each party to that. Now, what we look to do is to use requirements to drive down to a set of criteria and a set of questions that helps us do that selection. They need to make sure that they align to the G-Cloud catalog and the G-Cloud principles. So again, often we will see that non-functional requirements are more attuned to traditional outsourced or in-house package development, and we will see the need to often help people look to describe their service outcomes that they're trying to achieve for cloud services in terms that are actually appropriate to cloud and not, aren't just repeating. And that often requires a little bit of paper exercise to try and simplify that. With these criteria, we can then use a simple paper exercise to discount many of those that don't meet the criteria. We're looking for customer content management system, for example, that needs to be that support Microsoft platform. That might be a good set of business needs, and we can use that quite quickly to come up with a long list. And from that, we can then use those key criteria to help inform some of the clarification. So where service descriptions don't always go into the are 100% clear, or there's any doubt that the outcome that you're looking to achieve, we can use those key criteria to drive the evaluation and then the clarification process to come up with some evaluation of how closely that service fits the outcome you're trying to achieve. Typically, we should look for criteria to come up with simple yes and no outcomes. So again, trying to make them clear, um, uh, so that when anybody who's involved in this, it's not open to necessarily interpretation. It can be as hopefully as partitioned up and separated out amongst the team with hopefully a similar outcome. Often we will use multiple evaluators to help make sure you do get the consistency, but in this process, you look to try and those criteria to be quite straightforward. Make sure that the criteria should be there to help confirm accurately the costs. So needs to support 100 users, for example, needs to provide second line service management, for example. Those might be like good key criteria that you would look to make sure that the service descriptions do actually support and clearly identify the costs that go with them. Unfortunately, G-Cloud at the moment doesn't provide much quality control over the different service descriptions, and some of them are very immature, some of them are great detail. Both of those provide different challenges. If the detail isn't there and it's anything is open to interpretation, then actually what you're looking to do is probably build in additional cost. So that then falls back to you as the client to try and identify what are the additional things that I need to make this work that I'm going to have to stand up. Am I going to have to put more people on my service desk? Am I going to have a service manager to manage the supplier? All these need to be costed in if they're not included. So the criteria can provide unexpected results. That can require a feedback loop. So, there's nothing stopping this to be iterative and go back and rehome the service criteria if they find that actually the outcomes you're achieving are not what you want. But it also may look for you to challenge the business needs that you want and what the actual, again, those gold-plated requirements that can often provide expensive or slightly obtuse outcomes. So as an example of key criteria here, we've got how we've taken, this is just a section example of how we take a particular client's service requirements. In fact, in this case, it's the service design requirements. Service design in ITIL terms is split amongst the 7 process functions that are in front of us: service management, availability. And each of those, we've got a section of requirements that meet the outcomes that the business is looking to achieve. What we've done is then roll those up into a higher level set of service requirements. So they've been rolled up, and you'll see the color coding here. We use the color coding to once they've been through a dialogue with the service managers to identify the key requirements, the ones that the key business needs, the ones that are the most important, and ultimately we can actually roll that up into a higher service summary. And through this gradual rolling up of those requirements to the key criteria, we actually can use that to help us get clarity and understanding of what a service does and how to evaluate those different service descriptions against our requirements. The down select phase helps us take that initial 7,000 set of products that are currently in the catalog and use the key criteria to come to a short list. The keywords give you the long list. The key criteria help you with a short list, and typically you'll start to see parts of the process coming through here where we identify a number of different potentials, a cohort list that then by applying those criteria, we can make some simple evaluation um, scales where we can actually look to see how well the service description fits those key criteria, and then from that, that helps us score and evaluate and down select to a much shorter list. Typically, this will also start to identify candidates that we think are probably should be dropped, and at any point during this, services that don't meet the criteria can be removed. Equally, it might identify services where we are not confident that there is clarity in the service description, and that might require further clarification. So the clarification can often happen. It can either be a simple email, fill out a form, we've seen that, or it could be a face-to-face interview. And especially if these are suppliers that you're not familiar with, to get that confidence, then having face-to-face interviews uh, or even presentations by those suppliers can help give confidence not only to the procurement stakeholders, but also to the wider business owners, and bringing the business in to understand what the offerings are and what the capabilities are will help. Now, um, unfortunately, it's very difficult to actually, G-Cloud does not allow us to ask the question of how much will it cost and will you deliver all the requirements. However, through the clarification process, it is possible to confirm what are the key costs for the key processes or outcomes you're trying to achieve, the key services, and what the provide to the client, to the supplier, a set of criteria that they can uh, digest, and if they so desire, they can also give you further confidence by giving you clarity of whether their service meets that criteria. Now, the presentation is a very, very useful part of that, and certainly for any significant or business-wide wide stakeholder engagement, then the use of a presentation can help provide confidence and get all the various evaluators and SMEs involved in understanding what a supplier can do. Suppliers are not obligated to fully cost the whole service, and only clarify those terms. So it is on the client's responsibility, client's risk to make sure that their service is fully costed, their full end-to-end service. And this is where the financial model and those service descriptions start to come very important, where we can identify and through clarification confirm what the supplier is going to do, what he is not going to do, and then from there we can either factor in further costs or evaluate appropriately depending on the outcomes we're trying to achieve. Suppliers can be eliminated at any stage if they fail in the key criteria of services. So it's given using those key criteria, if they don't appropriately mark, and those are seen to be mandatory or even one of the highly desirables, then it might be appropriate at that point to eliminate and get down to a smaller number that helps with the evaluation exercise. So that supplier selection is where we actually then look across these four key areas. This means evaluation testing across the functionals, the non-functionals, implementation and requirements, and the costs to get a scoring of what is the most appropriate selection. Total cost of ownership is calculated from the service pricing guide, and needs to be from the prices that are available in that service. Suppliers can provide confidence and additional clarification during the engagement process, where they can give indications and they can give ideas of what standard packages of man time might be. So for example, typical installation package is 5 man days. However, having a hard obligation against the supplier for a service that isn't in the catalogue does actually break the framework rules. So it's all around getting the right terminology and the right understanding, and that understanding comes from that clarification exercise. Typically through this costing exercise, we will actually look to cost any of the impact of those dependencies, double spelling there, and those, once we've got the cost, we will actually award full score for that various section to the supplier with the lower cost. Each another supplier will actually get a proportion of the costs on a percentage of how much great it was. So, for example, a service that is twice the price will get none of the marks. The results for functional, non-functional, and implementation requirements are all based on a simple evaluation matrix, and then a weighting is used to um, help balance between the different requirements areas, those four different areas. Now, this is often where engagement with the business is needed to get um, the right selection criteria and the right weightings of the different areas. Often there is conflicts between price, obviously driven by maybe by service or by the procurement commercial side. At the other end, you want the business outcomes, and in um, in this world of inaccurate or differing quality of service descriptions, price is not always the most effective mechanism, and often we will discount um, clients from using that as a key leverage in any selection criteria. So you're always open to not pick the package that you've down selected, and equally we're always have the ability to go back and reset at any point during this whole process. So if we find the wrong outcome is as a result of possibly the criteria being wrong, it's possible for the business to reevaluate those criteria and to put it back into the sausage machine for the process. Obviously, the service with the best score is then passed to the SRO for approval with the audit trail and the various down selects to enable the SRO to have some confidence in the selection process. So what I'm going to try and just now quickly have a look at is how important it is in this requirements selection. Requirements are the basis, the backbone for articulating how these services will align to the business and the service operating model. As we are buying a service, not a piece of technology, we are interested in how this service that we're buying will interface to our in-house service capability. We've got a sort of just a pictorial view of how services may overlay on your existing infrastructure or existing organization. So here behind you'll see sort of a typical OSI 7-layer model for organizations for IT, ICT provision services. And in our traditional outsource world or single supply world, this is the sort of structure that's often used to articulate and to identify the different service lines. However, with the software as a service, you're interested in a service management regime that actually cuts across all areas of that. The service provider is responsible in his area for the at least some of all of these service lines. The only um, item that always sort of stands out, of course, is the golden thread, which is the technical security, where we're more interested in some of the technical aspects of that service and some of the functional outcomes that will come from it. But otherwise, from a non-functional point of view, we're often not interested in the platform it runs on, the database it runs on, or the infrastructure. We are worried about how easy it is to get on board and off board, the onboarding, and hence we might be interested in the technology underneath to help us. Is it going to be easy to migrate our data set into it? But typically we're not interested in the architecture or the technology underneath. We're interested in the service outcomes that we're achieving. And that's why it's then important to ensure that our service organization, our existing service organization, understands and fits very nicely into the obligations and the interfaces that that supplier is going to provide. So we've talked a number of times about ITIL and how ITIL service structure. It's a typical framework that is used by obviously by departments and by inference in the GCAL catalog and often by suppliers to articulate how their different service providers. And what we will typically do is look at the expectations of the internal or the SIAM, if it's outsourced, the SIAM organization the overarching service design component and how that will fit into this new cloud supplier. What we're trying to do is understand the obligations, those service interfaces, and hence the resource impact of bringing that service on board. And here you can see an example of how we've taken one particular package, one particular supplier service, and mapped that over the top of an existing organization across the 5 lines. And so, for example, obviously in the service design area, where this is more the responsibility of the supplier. It's the supplier service, it's they're responsible for it. We've got we need to be understand what's going on, but it's obviously the supplier has a responsibility. When it comes to more the service operation, that's the service for the service supplier to manage himself. That's the key part of what we're buying. When it gets into issues, service event management and incident management, of course, those become issues and areas that maybe as an organization we might be interested in. So what we try and do here is give you an idea of, we'll give an idea to a client of how that service organization will fit together across these different service lines. So you can get an idea of those interfaces and those obligations. So that's been a really quick tour of some of the key items, and obviously there's a level of detail below that, um, which is much easier probably to do in a face-to-face. But some of the things that we are trying to do and trying with this is de-risk and improve the quality of those outcomes by ensuring that we get commonality across the requirements area, that services align closely with the internal service organization, those service interfaces match up, that we get confidence in the catalog items that we're procuring that are described through those service descriptions, that we can understand what the costs are going to be between the different suppliers, between the different services, and what the additional cost obligations might be on each party to meet the outcomes that we need, the expectations that we might have, and ensure that we try and get no big surprises, that actually the costs are included in the business case and are actually well understood before the exercise, so that the SRO has got full visibility of the value and you can meet the business benefits that you're trying to achieve. This then helps you to achieve a end-to-end service outcome that might meet your business need, and at the same time give you that agility to move from service component to service component as necessary into a strategic delivery through a number of agile requirement deliveries. So just to conclude about us, we are an SME that provides both client-side and supply-side services around the G-Cloud area for secure government digital transformation. We've been involved in some of the smallest and the largest transformations out there, and some of the ones more recently you'll be aware of, DVLA, NCA, and the such like. Good focus on law enforcement and the security side of things, with a team that covers the whole range of services. So we give you breadth as well as depth and a lot of experience to give you the confidence and quality that enables you to get these very fast package evaluations. We are proven delivery of track record of delivering across transformation agile solutions, and have a lot of technical experience of delivering fast agile technical deliveries using the digital standards to achieve the outcomes the departments need to do and help drive those business benefits. So that just allows me to thank you for your time. And as I say, this is the second in our small series of um, webinars. In future, we're going to look a bit more into how those service interfaces can be better articulated and how you can get a better understanding of the costs and a better grip on the total cost and the benefits that you're trying to achieve. And that I'd just like to thank you. And if there's any more information you need, please don't hesitate to contact us. And if you'd like a copy of the slides, please give us a call.